It's been 2 years of collecting war tapes, and I realized out of the collection that I have, I actually really like the post-war and generally non-war stuff. Yeah, I know, kinda crazy, but that's a subject for another time. Over time, I'd be introduced to different styles. Speaking of different styles, that happened with Superton. If you know songs such as Srbi nie ponos, Još se ništa ne zna, Tata, braća pravoslavci, S Bogom selo, and for the real fans, Slomili smo Americi krila, you'll notice that these musical styles were all hailed by one orchestra, Pravoslavci, or Orthodoxy. In 1995, Superton had another orchestra in the ring, the orchestra of Željko Jovanović. And speaking of him, I've got a confession to make. I don't like Željko Jovanović's music. Yeah, I know. Listen, it sounds way too cheap and empty, if that makes any sense. And why I'll still collect stuff that was arranged by him, I tend to overlook them, since due to his style, they just don't mesh well with me. This was very true for the group Braća sa Dinare. I bought the self-titled debut album, and a little after, when I was still kind of new to the tape hobby, I purchased their album Fateful Zemlyo next, under the pretense that it would be just as good. When I initially played the album, I was unimpressed. I mean, where was the digital goodness? Once it arrived in the mail, I played it and then just deleted the recording, not thinking much of it. Fast forward to present day, what's changed? Well, later on I started learning more about the war. Not everything, mind you, but I'm a lot more aware. I also realized that the tape was moldy the whole entire time. That's right. It was moldy, meaning some of my tapes are probably infected now. Great. I was always wondering why it sounded so bad. But in all seriousness, if it's anything that I would give any praise to this album, it's that Fateful Zemlyo is the quintessential post-war album. I mean, literally, the recording of this album took place roughly 6 months after the war, or at least after the Dayton, Ohio stuff was finalized. And I know, I hear ya. Say, wait, but random. What about S Bogom oružje? Wasn't that hot off the press? And to that I say, yeah, and it's exactly that. This album is different, as it feels like there was ample time to sit down and process the weight of the end of the war. And don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure they were well aware of it back when it happened. So let me walk you through this. The album is unique in the Braća sa Dinare discography, as no band members are present on the cover. As a matter of fact, Mount Dinara takes front and center. The fold of the J card is a colored picture of Baja as a child, as well as a quote from Proka Jovkic, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which roughly translates to, I know I'm gonna overgeneralize here, if we're not finished yet, we'll keep fighting. Coincidentally, the J card's tracklist has everything as side A. Usually this is done for multi-cassette releases, but thinking about it and looking back at that quote, to me, I think it's just in that theme of not being finished, that more is on the way. Of course, we all know it never happened. When you sit down and actually listen to the album, you'll notice that it has a depressing tone and has a note of finality to it. And I think that's more of confirmation bias on my part, because this is the last Braća sa Dinare album from Superton. This album is pretty unique. I think it marks a change of direction. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still those funky little discotheque elements that are present in war albums, but this one's unique as it moves towards a traditional folk type style. And thinking about it more, I think Baja really wanted to reach the people as much as possible. So as a result, he decided to make an album that was less on the goofy little Jovanovićisms, as I call it, and make it for a wider audience. Not counting any smaller roles like lyricist credits or music by type credits, this would be the last Baya album released by Superton. In 1997, he would go on to Lazarevich Production for the album Ne dirajte njega, and the next year he would return to Nina Trade for Srpskim radikalima, as well as have his Renome debut Povratak u budućnost. He would then stick with Renome for, I think, until the late 2000s, where he would then move to BN Music. As for Braća sa Dinare, they would move on to Nina Trade, and the orchestra would be the powerhouse known as Slavko Mitrović Caleta. Godspeed, this guy's been working his ass off in this industry. I feel so bad for him. They would make 2 more albums, Ja se svoga ne oričem do groba and Idemo do kraja, both being far cries from their debut album. But I think this adds to that kind of finality tone to this album, and it makes me appreciate it a little bit more. But that's not all. You see, there's more to this, which I really do love. Let me explain. Novak actually doesn't return, though another Paichin would take his place. Who is that? Well, you're gonna have to take my word on it. I don't have the article on hand on me, and because I use Google Translate, I don't actually know where the article is. It just kind of disappeared. But if he is speaking the truth, a relative of Baya who fought in the war was concerned about what they were going to do after their military service, to which Baya promised them a career by giving them songs and basically saying, "You are gonna sing these songs. I got you." And that relative ended up being Lazo Paichin, which, rest easy, buddy. I heard life was not very fair to you. So in this album, I like to think that Baya decided that instead of Novak singing, Lazo would take his place for his own very vocal debut. It's either that or Novak decided to opt out, but he later said, what the heck, I'll do the last 2 albums. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer that no, this is not Lazo's first bout in the music industry. He actually did some songwriting, and I can trace the origins back all the way to Ret i Mir, I believe? Baya has like this dreaded tone in his voice. As groovy as Piesma Mok Chacha is, he sings in a lethargic tone. And my own copy makes Baya sound even more depressed, and for some reason this is duped at a slower speed. And the overall tone of this album is depressing, no matter if the song is supposed to be happy or not. And I don't think Jovanović's own techno emptiness helps in trying to at least uplift the album a little bit. The signature baseball song that's present in the Baya albums from Jovanović makes me sad instead of happy. I mean, it really feels like someone who is desperate to really lift the mood after something really bad happened.
Imam snagu, imam i lepotu, samo nemam sreće u životu.
And the titular song. In my outline here, I've called it a traditional digital sadness. I feel like the guitar MIDI is trying to emulate an instrument that's just not present for maybe budgetary reasons or lack of people. But that synth part, man, that synth part, it just sounds like rain hitting hard as you're walking away. Where does Lazo fit in? Well, Lazo sings the last 2 songs of the album, A7 and A8. Lazo sings one of the longest songs in the album, and as far as I know, it's about locations, well, mentioned in the... Hi, post-editing random attribute here. Okay, so I actually did the 5 seconds of research required to understand this subject matter, unlike some other channels, and I found out that this doesn't talk about like any other towns. These towns were specifically affected by Operation Storm one way or another, and something Dayton, Ohio agreement. Again, 5 seconds of research, and this ties in with A8. I don't know why I didn't do research beforehand, but hopefully I'm preventing a firestorm in the comments. And remember, kids, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Post-editing random attribute out. So A8 is Posle Oluja, and it translates to after the storm. And the storm is Operation Storm. And upon listening to the song a few times, I actually noticed something. So you may hear that the vocals sing in the tune of Mirishe na Kishu, but there's more than that. If you just pay close attention to the arrangement, it's like it's Jovanovich's own adaptation of Mirishe na Kishu, just like how he had his own interpretation of Ponoson sam Shlo sam Srbin. Thematically, they actually share similar, if not the same, topics. That being, of course, weather, somehow. I think Mirishe na Kishu is a lot more literal. It's raining somewhere. And, of course, Operation Storm. Storm has to deal with the weather. It's more figurative. They also talk about how there are places that are basically wiped off the map, one way or another. They've been damned. And it's one of those rare exceptions where Jovanovich's style actually benefits the song, as the cheesy choir MIDI actually gives the song an intentional, or I don't know, unintentional, uneasy dread. The accordion part gives a feeling of someone aimlessly traveling to an unknown destination. I mean, here, take a listen. And the more I sat down and listened to the album, the more I really appreciated it. And I hope that you too can learn to love this album in the way that I did. At least, I hope that you guys treat this with the same amount of respect that I do. You know who you are. You might be confused, but you absolutely know what I mean. But I don't know, am I looking too deep into things? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace!